Hello, everybody, and welcome to this pre-scene annotation session. We're going to break the videos up, so nothing should be more than 10 to 15 minutes, so there'll be a bunch of different videos, but I'm guessing this will probably be the first one you've clicked on, in which case I thought I'd say hello. My name's Stuart Murphy. I'm going to be your tutor for the course, so be your main point of contact. I'll be doing all these pre-recorded sessions and hosting live sessions as well. And I just want to say, well done getting so far in your CIMA qualification. You've got one more exam to go through, and I'm looking forward to working with you to get this done. So a little bit more, and then at least you'll have your exam passes, although you still need to fill that logbook in, which I can testify. It can be a bit tricky, but yeah, definitely get it done as soon as possible. That way you don't have too many years of experience to fill in. Okay, so guessing you're aiming for the May 25 or possibly August 25 sitting here, and we're going to run through the pre-scene material. So we've got Leothayre, which is a satellite company, which isn't too bad. Had some worse industries. I think it's quite interesting. If you're into your science fiction like I am, it's quite a good one. So they start off with a bit of context statement, just to say, they're not expecting you to be experts on kind of world events. This was added during the coronavirus with the lockdowns, and lots of students were wondering when they were sitting their strategic case study exams in that time, or do we have to factor in that the world's locked down? And CIMA said, no, just kind of ignore that for now and just mainly rely on the scenario and your industry research, and it's sort of similar here, saying, if you were to add some current affairs in, it's not going to necessarily score you really well. It said it will be marked on its merits. I guess the main issue at the moment is the Ukraine war that you could bring in and have an effect. Might have an impact on the satellite industry, but I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think you better stick with specific industry research rather than looking for world events that could possibly impact this industry. So basically, just start off and say it's a bit of a boilerplate, but it's a common query. How much research should I do, and what kinds of things should I be researching? Okay, so a little bit of an introduction to our company here. So Leothayre is a quoted company. They provide a range of solutions to customer needs for small satellites that are generally located in low Earth orbit. So this all made a lot more sense to me, especially the low Earth orbit thing, after having read through the scenario once. As we're reading through, I'm just gonna, you can see I've added some notes here to the PDF to try and pick out some thoughts I was having as I'm reading through to, try and look at the potential impact come the exam. So the fact that they're a quoted company might mean they have to raise some money, and if you're quoted, that gives you greater access to capital. If you're an LTD company, then you can only sell your shares for a private transaction. So there's a much more limited market for your shares in that case. Whereas if you can sell them to the public, then you can have greater access to capital. It's also seen as sort of a respectful thing that if you're on the stock exchange, then you've got to be a fairly solid company, sort of thing. So it gives you a bit of kudos for your reputation. Downsides then, pressure from shareholders. If you're thinking strategic planning, you can't really do anything too crazy. Later on in the scenario, it talks about how they really want to be innovative, but ultimately, you can't really shock the shareholders in a quoted company. They tend to not like that. They like to, if you do your rational planning and to have a 5-year plan and sort of execute that 5-year plan, don't just jump about from one potential opportunity to the other. And then increased regulation. So a bunch of rules to follow if you're going to be listed on the stock exchange, around audits and things like that. Um, so they can assist in the design, design of satellites, and they can support customers in reaching an agreement with the providers of launch facilities. So we'll come back to that a little bit more later on, but I just thought it was an interesting situation they're in. They kind of would like to be an end-to-end solution. So come to us if you want a satellite, we'll design it, build it, run it for you. But the launching, which is going to be quite a key thing in getting a satellite into operation, they don't do that, so they outsource that. You're a senior manager in Leothayre's finance function, so we've got to think about the long-term impact of any decisions we make. I think especially with the starting bit here, where it goes through the sort of nuts and bolts of what satellites are and how rockets work and things like that, it would be very easy to get drawn into the operational details of running a satellite. But let's try and think about, okay, what's going to be the impact of this over the next this decision over the next, say, 3 to 5 years. As a senior manager, would expect to show a little bit of leadership as well. That could often get tested in the form of ethics. So, making sure you're doing the right thing, setting the right tone at the top, setting the direction for the company, not just controlling things and making sure those budgets are hit and the policies are adhered to, trying to think about the future, maybe inspiring the workforce, that sort of thing. So those are things we'd expect from a leader. Reporting, if you're going to the board, is going to be highly summarized. So, we're avoiding TMI, sort of getting into too much detail for the board. And also, we can't just be internally focused. We have to think about the external factors as well. So there's lots of things in the case study about the growing market for satellites. You're directly to the board for special projects and strategic matters. That's pretty standard. So possibly one of the scenarios might involve a special project that you're working on, maybe improving the reporting systems. That was something that came up in the strategic risks, or just general strategic matters. Might be an acquisition, or maybe it would be we want to grow the business, and how can we possibly do that? So you're going to come up with some strategic options. Leothayre's head office is located in Wexland, a developed country. Said it has an active and a regulated stock exchange. So again, you see this a lot in the case study pre-scenes. So nothing really new there, but I always like to try and think about, well, how could this link back to all that theory you've learned with E3 and P3 and F3 sort of thing. So I think this links quite well with the efficient market hypothesis. So, about the share prices responding rationally. So you've got weak, semi-strong, and strong. Strong's like, everything and all the stuff the directors know is reflected in the share price. That's usually very unrealistic. For example, the London Stock Exchange is seen as an example of a semi-strong market, semi-efficient market, if you like. So all the historic information is reflected, and all the publicly available information is reflected in the share price. And as you guys might have spotted if you've read the pre-scene, then the share price is dropping at the moment. And within the scenario, there's no kind of clear explanation about why that happened. So again, I think that's links quite well with the theory. Maybe there's something in the public information that we're not aware of at the moment, at least. And then we follow international financial reporting standards, as you would expect. So that's kind of setting us up for going through our pre-scene. Okay, carrying on, running through the pre-scene. So next section is headed up satellites. So we're told lots of details about satellites in this section. I'm not going to read through every single bit of it. I'll try and pick out what I thought was relevant to us. So there's 10,000 active satellites. So I thought possibly that could give us an indication of the market size, although we probably need a little bit more detail to really understand that, because we're not given the breakdown between the geo and the geosynchronous orbits, the medium synchronous orbits, and the low synchronous orbits, or low Earth orbits. See, still learning a little bit about this industry. But the number is expected to grow significantly over the next few years, and then later on, it does mention that over the next decade, it's expected to go from 10,000 satellites to 70,000 satellites. So it is a huge growth opportunity, that. So when I'm reading through, I generally like to keep an eye out for, especially this first bit. This tends to be about the market. So you're really looking for opportunities and threats. So you're doing a wee bit of a SWOT analysis as you're reading through the pre-scene. And you just need to keep in mind that your strengths and weaknesses tend to be internal, your opportunities and threats tend to be external. They come from outside. So what's happening out there that could help us, opportunities, or out there that could hurt us, threats. So Great opportunity. I also like to try to balance out my points as well as much as possible. So if there's a positive, I like to come up with a negative, and vice versa. Because at the strategic level, you're expected to evaluate options, not just to say, pros and cons, yeah, or not just say one of the other, I guess. So the problem for us strategically is it's a very attractive market. Name any market that you think is going to increase by 7 times over the next 10 years, and you're going to have a bunch of people out there who could be eyeing the market and thinking, "Oh, I wouldn't mind increasing my sales by 7 times over a decade." Think about, would you like to increase your income by 7 times over a decade? So that would increase the threat of new entrants because people would be possibly looking to enter the market. Now, we'll keep coming back to these models as we go through. The threat of new entrants is Porter's five forces. We could see the significant barriers to entry here, but think about some of the companies that are already in this industry that could maybe start to expand into satellite provision. From reading through this, it seems like the companies that do the launches, mm, that could be something they could look at and go, I wouldn't mind actually doing the whole thing. So potential source of competition there for us. Um, so these satellites maintain their positions for a very long time. So I was thinking, and I'm sure you guys had similar thoughts as you're going through. It's a really risky proposition. Would you like to build something and then send it off to space and then just hope that it works for, I mean, it says a very long time, possibly 5, 10 years, basically. So yeah, I'd have to be really sure of what I'm doing to feel confident to say, yeah, I could build something like that for you. And I think again a couple of challenges here. So obviously it's not going to be replaced very often. If I buy a satellite, I might buy one every 5 to 10 years. So really long time between transactions. So then if you're a satellite company, how do you sort of generate revenue in the meantime? You can't just hang around and wait sort of 5 years for someone to buy something from you again. So that's something I'd be looking for if I was a Leothayre board of directors, is ways of generating regular income, just not just for the satellite sales. And you guys will have seen there's been a big move to subscription models now. So even Apple are sort of looking at themselves as a subscription company rather than a phone company or a piece of technology company. They don't just want you to buy a phone every 3 to 5 years. They want you to be giving them money every single month. So they've come up with things like the iCloud, so you have to subscribe to get more storage, um, Apple TV and things like that. So I can imagine possibly a scenario involving something along those lines. Um, the other thing I was thinking is the satellites are obviously still relatively expensive. The cost is coming down, which has increased the size of the market. But I remember reading about Rolls-Royce, and Rolls-Royce have got Rolls-Royce Finance now. So rather than them actually selling their engines to the airplanes or the airplane manufacturers or the airlines, they actually lease them to them. And so they're not just making money from the initial sale, they're also providing finance, so they're making interest as well. And I thought this could possibly be an option for Leo there. Rather than just selling a satellite, they could lease satellites to people instead. And maybe that would even mean that if the satellite is up there for a few years, they could lease it to a few different people in that time, depending on their need. So lots of different options there. It mentioned, so we do the small satellites. We're generally looking for the low Earth orbit. Um, so small satellites, the Leo and the MEO satellites, tend to be non-geosynchronous. So this is a bit of a problem if like say later on it talks about me being a farmer and wanting to buy myself a satellite to keep an eye on my farm and the weather above my farm. It's not going to stay above my farm, which is a pain. So the solution is to launch constellations of satellites, but then the problem for me as a farmer is, well, I might be able to afford one, assuming I'm a very big farmer, but then can I afford like however many it takes to constantly monitor my farm? So this again might be a potential opportunity for them to go out and identify customers who want these things and maybe group them together. Um, uh, so possibly even selling a satellite, it's not just to one customer, but to a few different ones that are going to share them. Um, Eventually, friction from the atmosphere causes them to overheat to the point where they disintegrate and their fragments fall to Earth. So bit of a risk if we did start to expand into larger satellites. I wondered about, has there ever been a situation where the satellite didn't burn up in orbit before it fell to Earth? And presumably that risk gets bigger as they get into larger satellites. Again, something I might mention, like they've got an order for a big satellite. They've not done it before. They can't guarantee that it's going to disintegrate on its way to Earth, on its re-entry to Earth. Do they do it or not do it? And then I think one of the things that came out through the pre-scene quite a lot is sustainability issues. There's quite a lot of waste with this process. The fact that you don't recycle the satellites, they just burn up in the Earth's orbit. Is that going to be sustainable? Presumably they use rare earth minerals, so where are they going to keep getting all these rare earth minerals if we get throwing them out into space? So small satellites have become increasingly popular. So we are in the growth area of the market. 85% are LEO. So they were in the biggest chunk of the market. So that's like the safest place to be. There's lots of potential customers for us. Whereas if we're at the 3% for the MEO, the mid-Earth orbit, a little bit more concern. But then you could look at it and go, well, maybe the MEO is an untapped market. Maybe for some reason people just haven't gone after that market as hard as the Leo market. Uh, I imagine it comes down to cost. Putting something into low Earth orbit is going to cost less than putting it into mid Earth orbit. But maybe as costs come down, the MEO market is going to open up for us. So we're in a bit with the largest chunk of the large share of the market in the high growth. So if you're thinking, okay, strategic theories wise, it's in the Boston Consulting Groups would be considered to be in the star area. Most recent growth is in the nano and micro satellites. So I said there about risk of going for larger satellites, but that doesn't seem to be where the growth is. It seems to be in making them as small as possible. So smaller means cheaper. Smaller means you can launch more satellites in one go. So we've got the CubeSats at the moment, and then we're told that they now have the Pocket Cubes, which are half the size. So the CubeSats are 10 by 10, but the Pocket Cubes are 5 by 5 by 5, which means you can actually fit 8 of them in the same area for a single CubeSat because it's cubes. It's 8. You'd think it would be 2 because it's half the size, but the way it works with a cube is 8. So that would be quite a significant increase in the number of satellites we can sell in one go. So again, in terms of E3, Ansof's growth matrix, this is where we can classify this as a product development type strategy, and so this might be something that we want Leothayre to look at to see if they can make them smaller again, possibly. Then we're told that these satellites have delicate external components could be easily damaged during the launch. It comes back to the whole there's just so many places that this could go wrong. And so this one for me, I was thinking strategic versus operational risk. So for most companies, you would say product failure would be considered an operational risk, right? So if you have a faulty car, that's probably an operational risk. It's just something that's going to happen on the regular day to day, and it's not going to mean that your business fails. However, for Leothayre, product failure might be more of a strategic risk instead. So sort of making sure you're happy with the difference between a strategic and operational risk for your P33 would be a good shout, I'd say. In some cases, the thrusters are used to bring the satellite back to Earth in a controlled manner. If its orbit has been started to decay, there are concerns that it will shower a populated area with debris. So small satellites do not have room for thrusters or for the fuel that they require to power them. So you kind of you read through the scenario and ask yourself like, why would the examiner include things like this? And so if there is a chance a small satellite is going to land on a populated area, there's really not much we can do about it, is there? Because they can mitigate that risk on a larger satellite by having these thrusters, but for us, we just don't have space for them. So again, a way of distinguishing between a strategic or operational risk would be the scope of the impact. So your product failing could potentially mean that the satellite lands on a populated area, which would have a massive impact. Anytime there's a threat to human life or human health, then that would probably escalate a risk to a strategic risk. Okay, so let's look at the sorts of things that the satellites can get involved in. So we're given a bit of information about the satellite mission. So we've got communications and a bit of detail about the communications. Communications can be enhanced by launching constellations of satellites. Navigation, so navigation satellites are large and located in geosynchronous orbits. These are the only things that stood out to me so far here. Earth observation satellites in low Earth orbit can take specific masses of interest, so they can be very focused on one area. Large farming corporations might launch their own satellites, or farmers might pay a satellite operator to scan their fields and deliver regular reports. So this is where I thought that subscription model could come in. So they've got large farming corporations, so the huge farms that makes it, cost versus benefit, makes it financially viable to have your own satellite. But what if you're a small farmer? You might want to be able to, just log into the satellite and have a look for yourself, sort of thing, at what the weather's doing. You won't be able to afford to launch your own satellite, but you might be willing to pay for the privilege of that. And then research development, so they can scan deep space. Satellites can launch experimental space vehicles. Satellites can create alloys and other materials or manufacture completely spherical ball bearings. I thought that was interesting. So I don't know if you've ever seen a ball bearing, but they do look very spherical. But I guess the gravity means that they're going to be a little bit squashed, sort of thing. Just can't get away from the gravity. I think this is an interesting area. Just saying that there are some additional, almost industries that are reliant on satellites. So scanning deep space. Um, so who's going to want to do that? Universities and space exploration agencies. Satellites can launch experimental space vehicles. So again, and even now, there's private companies looking to do that sort of thing as well. Satellites can create alloys and other materials or manufacture goods. Again, the question would be, well, how do we get those goods back? So there's loads of different opportunities here for Leothayre. You can see I didn't really see much in terms of linking it back to the theory here. Um, the launching constellations of satellites, that was really the one that stood out to me, that comes up a couple of times here. So that would be a good shout in terms of targeting the most profitable kinds of customers rather than going after customers who want one satellite. I might make more money if I'm launching a constellation of satellites because I can charge them more, but really it's not necessarily going to cost me that much more, at least to do the project management side of things. I imagine it's very similar whether you're building one or you're building six. Um, but so that might be a good strategic decision to target those kind of customers. Orbits, again, they mentioned here about this launching the constellations here. So this, I think, is just highlighting a potential strategic issue in the future as we go from 10,000 satellites to 70,000 satellites. You would think, well, we've got the entire Earth, so there's loads of space out there. You're not necessarily going to run into each other, but it's just showing that there are some particular, almost like flight paths that we'd want to take advantage of. So they tend to be going over or across. So you don't see them going diagonally. So there is a limited number of places that you can put satellites where they're going to be useful, and there's no regulations. We find out later on about these low Earth orbits. So how will we know where to put things? Requires a bit of coordination. Earth's gravitational pull is greater at lower altitudes, means the satellites must maintain a higher velocity in order to remain in orbit at lower altitudes. So, uh, more risk of impact. The faster we're going, there's, and we don't have any thrusters to avoid the satellites, the more chances that we're going to run into somebody. Ground stations. So this is part of the service that we provide. So we have our own ground stations, or we can provide them to customers, or we can put them in touch with people who build them for them. They vary enormously in size and complexity. So you go from the land-based ones, like in the picture displayed there, all the way through to the ground-based in the vehicles, um, and even down to mobile phones, or maybe not mobile phones, but mobile phone-sized devices. So opportunity for more small or short or low cost missions, it seems like. So the satellites are getting smaller. The things we need to communicate with the satellite are getting smaller and more convenient. It mentions here that there was a satellite antenna could be smaller to built into a portable device, including satellite dishes going into a backpack, and they use this actually to provide internet access for engineers working at a remote building site for the duration of the satellite's life. So yeah, it's the way that the industry is going. Um, so bit of a you could say market development opportunity here. So I don't know about you guys, but I never would have thought about if you're working in a remote area with bad internet, maybe buying yourself a satellite to increase your internet access. But it's now becoming a viable option. I guess it depends on how how remote it is. If it's just a bad signal, there might be other options for you. And then how are we going to market this? So it's my kind of question here. So it wouldn't have sprung to my mind to think of this as an option. So how do we get that kind of message into people's heads that, look, this is now a viable option. It's maybe not as expensive as you think. It's not a crazy idea. Some people are doing it. And that would feed into the marketing strategy with the 4Ps. So product, I said maybe they don't want the whole uh, life of the satellite. Maybe they just need it for 6 months or a year. Is that an option that we can give them? Price, well, now we're looking at selling time as opposed to selling satellites. So what price would people be willing to pay for that? Place, where are we going to find these things and how are we going to sell them? Is Google website going to be good enough? But then we need people to go out there and Google these things. How are we going to sort of where are we going to sell them? Um, and then uh, promotion. So how are we going to get this idea out there? Is probably not worth paying for a national television advert. We need to get to the decision makers. Maybe we need to do a bit of customer identification, like what kinds of customers are going to be doing this. We've got this example here of their building company with a remote building site. Maybe that would be a good place to start and do a bit more targeted marketing rather than mass market. So launching the satellites, there's lots of information here. It all seems very sort of practical. I can't really see how they could bring this out into um, a the case study. At least into your answer, I could see how there could potentially be an issue because, say, the first stage doesn't disconnect from the second stage or the payload for some reason, and who's liable for that? Or the rocket is going to crash back to Earth with its payload and it won't disintegrate. How are we going to sort this out? But apart from that, I can't really see how this level of detail is going to come out. I think something that kept coming out, especially with the rockets, is this sustainability issue. It seems very wasteful to build these really big rockets and then throw them up in space, and we can't possibly reuse them. So, the second stage in the payload, they come back to Earth. The first stage, again, jettisoned and falls back to Earth. It mentions here there are several standard models adapted to carry different payloads. If a rocket has spare capacity, then it can be used to launch additional satellites. So capacity management for the launch companies is going to be a key issue. And that might give us the opportunity to bargain with them to fill up the space with our satellites. It mentions here that if they don't get enough satellites, they just have to fill the space with concrete blocks for ballast, which is, then you've got to pay for the concrete. I appreciate it's probably not expensive in the grand scheme of things compared to building a rocket. But it's a lost opportunity there. It's probably the lost contribution that's going to be more of the thing that's going to be uh, to uh, disappoint them a bit more than having to pay for the concrete. So it seems very similar to maybe managing seats capacity on an airline. Everything's kind of standardized. Either we sell the ticket or we don't on that particular flight. Same sort of thing here. We've got a finite window in order to sell the launching into space, and either we sell it or we don't. So possibly, if we wanted to try and get the best price, we could play a bit of chicken with them and pretend we don't need it until we do. And the closer we get to launch date, maybe the better price we're going to get there. Um, Satellite launches require careful planning. So this is where I think there could be an issue on our side of things. So we will have a scheduled launch date, and everything's been approved. They've looked at the weather forecast. It's booked in for that particular date. There's not going to be a lot of slack in these things, and also it seems like we're not the only ones that are going to be on this rocket, so they can't really delay it for us because there's a bunch of other passengers or satellites waiting to get up there. Some are bigger. They seem to sort of fill the space with a big one, and then um, if they have any spare capacity, they add the Mios and the Leos in there afterwards. So I imagine the big ones are kind of like their cash cow. That's the payday for them, so they'll get priority. So if our projects are running behind and we miss the window, the launch window, that could have a really big knock-on effect on our customers because we might have to wait for the next one, which could be months or even years away. If the orientation is incorrect, then the satellite sensors may be pointed out to space instead of towards its intended location on Earth. Incorrect orientation could also prevent solar panels from collecting sufficient light to produce power or could prevent clear communication with users. So I thought it was interesting because it's saying you could do everything right. You could build a great satellite, but when it gets put into orbit, they put it the wrong way around for some reason. It was pretty much all for naught. So whose responsibility is that? Um, and this kind of comes back to the risk mitigation strategy. So obviously, it seems like they've gone with a transfer strategy here. So basically saying we create the satellites, we hand it over to the customer, you take complete ownership of it. It's now your responsibility with the rocket company to make sure that things get done the way they're supposed to. And if it doesn't work out, it's not our sort of thing. And they mentioned here about these complicated mathematical calculations. So that seems like probably a good shout, given the capital requirements of setting up your own rocket company and the intricacies involved, the expertise required. So you could do ad hoc, could do project, you could do partial, you could do total. They've chosen to go with the total outsourcing. So outsourcing would be something I would definitely make sure that I've got a couple of pros, well, say 3 pros, 3 cons about. I was thinking a potential scenario here where one of the directors wants to develop their own rocket potential, or they might have the opportunity to acquire a launch company, a rocket launch company, and then you'd have to discuss whether it makes sense or not. And so if you able to argue the pros and cons of outsourcing. You could say, well, the pros of outsourcing are the X, Y, Z. That's why it would be a good idea not to buy this company and just keep outsourcing. But then the cons are X, Y, Z, A, B, C. So these would be all arguments for acquiring that particular company. I find the biggest challenge when it comes to wordy exams for us accountants tends to be idea generation. So the more you can prepare beforehand, the easier the exam is because you're not having to do so much heavy lifting in there. You've already got some stock ideas thought about. So rockets require launch sites, infrastructure. Um, and then there's a bit here about the Earth's circumference being longer at the equator, which means launching towards the east from the equator will maximize that benefit. So around the equator and sort of going east tends to be a little bit more political instability. So there's a potential scenario there where there's a new, I would say like they later on they do mention there's not really any point in launching from countries that are politically unstable, but there might be a new rocket company in a country and they're considering using them because they're a bit cheaper or something like that because they're brand new. And this would be something that you'd have to factor in. So, is it a suitable, acceptable, feasible decision? Safe is a good way of evaluating strategic decisions. So, is it acceptable? You can maybe look at the government of that country as a stakeholder and go, right, okay, are they happy to support this? Because it normally does need a bit of government support. If the government is anti space, then it's probably not going to last very long. And then I did think another model they could potentially test here would be Porter's Diamond. So there might be like a case for a joint venture. Maybe one of the rocket companies is looking for a partner to open up a new launch site in one of these countries, and they've approached us about being a joint venture partner. So they don't want to pay for the whole thing themselves, so they want us to help fund it, and they want us to provide some staff, some expertise around this, and maybe we'll get preferential rates on launching with this joint venture company or something like that. So they're looking for a suitable country. Porter's Diamond would work quite well in that situation. So what's the firm strategy, structure, and rivalry in the countries, like the culture, what are the factor conditions, what are the demand conditions in there, are there any related supporting industries? Incur the expense of using a large rocket. Okay, so yes, so you can go the other way, and maybe that's what will happen in the scenario. So we have the option to go with the cheaper, more risky option of launching in this country where they're going eastwards and it's nearer the equator, or we can go west, but you're going to have to pay a little bit more. And I thought about this with their values, which they mentioned about excellence in decisions and not promising customers things they can't deliver. And I thought, well, this would be a great example of how they're going to have to put their hand in their pocket and pay a little bit more to live up to those values. Because if for some reason they have these two options, they probably go with the safer one. Determines the location direction determines the area into which debris and gases created by the rocket will return to Earth. So again, a bit of sustainability with E3 and F3. So your integrated reporting. We are part of this business. We can't just sort of wash our hands of it and say, oh, that's up to the launch company sort of thing. We pay them, and we, if we tend to go for more easterly facing rockets, or that go that way, then you could argue we're encouraging that. So then, does that mean that more pollution is going east? And then we could talk about the sustainability issues and the ethical issues with that. Spaceports are launch sites that serve large rockets, so you can get dedicated spaceports. The risk of injury or damage to property is minimized with large items of debris being dropped into expanses of ocean or uninhabited desert and kept clear of aviation flights. So risk and sustainability issues again. Prevailing weather. So weather, not always thought of as a strategic risk, but in this case it would be. If there is adverse weather, then that means that our satellites are grounded and not able to get up into the sky, so we're not going to make any money from operating them. So we're really dependent on weather. Conditions of extreme heat or cold, so I thought we could factor that in when we're considering what country we want to maybe help open the spaceport in. This sort of fictional scenario we came up with. Um, we'd call that a basic factor condition. So what conditions are inherent to the country? If they're basic, it's kind of like what God gave them. What's there naturally, and if it's an advanced factor condition, it's what they've built for themselves. It does mention here about adequate transport links for delivery of parts and rocket fuel and payload. So good airports, good roads, trains, that sort of thing. And then it mentions about, yes, so very little point in locating in countries that are politically unstable or that have unsupportive governments. So government, you would maybe put that under advanced factor conditions as well. And then I thought for the delivery of parts, you'd want some related and supporting industries. Is there a thriving space industry in there that can provide us with the appropriate components, or not? Do we have to fly them in from overseas, which would increase the expense? Okay, into the meat of the pre-seed now. So Leothayre is our company, and we're going to get into a little bit more detail about Leothayre. So just before we do, things I tend to like to look out for as I'm going through these, and I'll try and spot as many as I can. But I'm human, I'm fallible. If you do spot any of these that you think I've missed, feel free to let me know in the community circle. So I like to know whether we're differentiated or cost leader. I think it's pretty obvious that we're going to have to be differentiated here. Um, we can't really be doing cheap satellites, mass produced. So differentiated. Current strategies. So I want to know, look, what, differentiated or cost leader is like a top level strategy. How does that play out practically? And then, we've kind of got our corporate strategy, and then we're down to our functional strategies. So what's the plan for HR over the next few years? What's the plan for marketing over the next few years? Then organizational structure, so that has an influence on your strategy. Is it appropriate for the strategy? They mention here that they want to be innovative. So does their corporate structure facilitate innovation, or is it more bureaucratic, which can stifle innovation? Critical success factors. So what are they going to have to be really good at in order to succeed? It's going to give them a competitive advantage. Generally, I'm looking for strengths and weaknesses. So if I can't allocate something that I think is interesting to any of those things, I'll go, okay, well, if they're good at it, it's a strength. If they're bad at it, it's a weakness. And then stakeholders. And stakeholders, I'm thinking a bit of Mendelow's matrix. It's always good to keep an eye. So, are there any stakeholders in here that we say are key players? Are there any in here that we'd say are keep satisfied, etc.? So it was founded in 2004 and it was quoted in 2017. So it's been around for a while, and assuming we're in 2025, then it's over 2 decades old, and it's been on the stock market for over 5 years. So you'd like to think it's pretty well established and they're quite familiar with the stock market rules. They do a complete satellite service. They do specialize in small satellites, 1 to 75 kilograms. It provides a complete service starting from initial consultation, continuing through to launch operation satellites or satellite constellations. So satellite one, satellites plural, or satellites constellation, which I guess are designed to all work together. So bringing a bit of theory here, it sounds like they're vertically integrated is what they're aiming for. But there's still a big chunk in the middle of all of this, which is the launch. They don't do themselves, they do outsource that. So you could argue they outsource what would be considered a core competence, a thing that could potentially give them a competitive advantage, basically. So again, good to know pros and cons of outsourcing. From my point of view, if I outsource the launches, I'm never going to get a competitive advantage from the launches, basically. So, um, but they're experts, it's cheaper, there's arguments for and against it. Leothayre's engineers have the necessary knowledge and experience, so it reads like the staff are a strength, or you could argue maybe like a critical success factor. So engineering, being really good at engineering is going to be a critical success factor for them. Um, and as I said, I try and keep an eye out for current strategies, and I really didn't see much going on here in terms of like how are they going to keep recruiting these engineers in the future. And I guess another thing like necessary knowledge and experience, that sort of leads me to thinking about a bit of E3 knowledge management. So what are we doing to capture that knowledge, share that knowledge, disseminate it around, especially if new staff come in, and then learn from it as well. What are we doing to get better? How are we using knowledge as a potential source of competitive advantage? I think particularly for Leothayre when it comes to project management, because it's all going to be it's a very project-based business, isn't it? Every satellite is going to be a little bit different, and so are we getting better and better at managing projects? Are we learning lessons? Are we learning from things that have gone wrong? You'd like to think that our project plans and our project budgets are going to be pretty accurate by now. Leothayre's workshops have the staff and equipment that are required to design and build small satellites. This is a specialized area. So, some strategic issues. So it's a specialized area, which means that, probably not many people do it. It's better to be a master in this particular area than sort of a jack of all trades. But then there are some cons, if for some reason there's a drop in demand for this particular kind of satellite, then we're heavily exposed to it. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen, but it's worth thinking about the strategic risks. Components are robust and reliable. So quality management is a key thing here. So I'd be looking at total quality management and thinking about how they could bring in those features for it. Supply chain management as well. So they mentioned here about all the components must be certified and suitable for space. So anything we buy in, we can't just like go on the internet and go, right, I need some nuts or bolts. We have to maybe do a good amount of research into all the potential suppliers. We might want to have some primary suppliers and some backup suppliers. And we really need to make sure that we're doing a lot of performance management on these suppliers. If something was to fail in the testing, right? Because if it fails in space, how would you ever know it was that particular thing that failed? So when it fails in testing, we need to be able to trace that component back to the exact delivery, an exact supplier that it came from, and think about why did it. Now, and we've got two choices. We can say, right, we'll never work with that supplier again, or we have to work with them to improve their quality. Uh, uh, Obviously, if this is the third time it's happened, that might be a different decision compared to say the first time. Oh, we worked with them for 10 years. This is the first time it's happened. Let's trace it back. It might even be that they got a new member of staff and they hadn't been trained properly, and we can help them trace down that problem. So it's the performance management stuff, the data management is going to be really important. Extensive test facilities that can test for the effects of vibration, extreme heat and cold. Okay, that sounds really expensive. So that's a good barrier to entry to protect us from all those new entrants that are going to come in because we're in a growing market. Leothayre does not operate its own rockets, but it has close working relationships with several launch providers. So a bit of supply chain management again. I like the close working relationships. I guess that's probably a little bit different from like if I was working with airlines. I guess I could go on and just like lots of my staff fly from London to Glasgow, but I always just say go on a website and find the cheapest possible ticket. Or instead of that, I go, right, I'm going to pick two airlines and I'm going to work with them. And we're going to get a good relationship, build up some air miles, that sort of thing. So I've chosen to go with the second option here. Um, and then one thing I was wondering, I thought there can't be that many launch providers, but it does say that they have close working relationships with several, which might imply there's a few of them. So that means that the bargaining power for suppliers might not be as big an issue as I originally thought. I was thinking there's probably going to be maybe two or three big rocket companies, and there might be loads of satellite companies, in which case, it all comes down to scarcity. Those with the scarce resource have the bargaining power. So it's not quite clear now who is scarce, us or them. And meeting client deadlines, that's kind of a key thing here. So, we need to work closely with the rocket companies to make sure that we're doing that. So it might be that we have to bring things forward if there's some bad weather coming, otherwise it's going to be delayed. And hopefully they would tell us that so that we can then do what we can. Can provide ground stations. Leothayre owns and operates its own ground stations and can organize additional support from third parties for missions that require specialized equipment. So yeah, full service provider, which is great, because especially if we did want to go after those newer customers who never bought a satellite or satellites hand before, they probably are the kind of people that would say, well, I don't want to have to go to two or three different people to figure this out because new to this. So if they came to us, we could give them one, a single stop solution for it. And then additional revenue as well, because the fact like we're going to launch the satellite will make money, and then we'll help you look after it will make money as well. And servicing tends to be more profitable than the original launch. A typical mission takes 12 to 18 months from initial conversation. So that seems like a very long time, 12 to 18 months. So like if I agreed something in 2025, it might be, we're in March 2025 now. It might not be till towards the end of 2026 when it gets launched. Repeat builds can be 4 to 6 months. So I think there's a bit of a capacity management issue here, a bit of a bottleneck. Something's holding us up. It does say later on that we've got a substantial number of orders waiting. And so it's not that we can't win business, it's that we're struggling to deliver the business in a reasonable timescale. I'd love to win a bit of business and deliver it this year. That's how I'm going to grow my business. The Leothayre standard, which is basically a CubeSat, right? So remember, the CubeSat is the bigger one, and the Pocket Cube was a smaller one. So we haven't got a smaller one; we've got a bigger one. And they do the 3U, the 6U, and the 12U configurations. So still small satellites. Design incorporates solar panel arrays and can be adapted to accommodate any type of sensor. So solar panel arrays would mean that it's designed to last a little bit longer, but maybe the market's moving to shorter, more kind of almost throwaway satellites. I can't believe I'm saying that, but that might be the way it's going. So we might need to cut down the size of these and get rid of these solar panel ones, solar panel arrays. It's quicker to adapt to Leothayre standard to meet emissions requirements than it is to design a satellite from scratch. So yeah, potentially we've got a unique selling point there, but they say it's quicker, but it's still saying taking 12 to 18 months. So you really have to go, so what's the standard in the industry? That'd be really interesting to know. And then we've got a potential competitive advantage there because we've got our own modifiable satellite, but are we really leveraging it as hard as we could? It's still taking 12 to 18 months. Leothayre has successfully launched 64 satellites, all of which were designed and manufactured by the company. I sort of thought that's interesting they've dropped that in. Sometimes you read things and it doesn't quite seem to fit into the context. So it sort of jarred me out of my reading, and I thought, well, I could definitely see a scenario there where they have the opportunity to outsource some of their production to another company, and then it would be discussed. This would allow them to catch up on the backlog of orders that they've got here. But then they, is it align with their values and things like that? So that would be a good one where you could bring in a bit of the safe thing. So, is it suitable? So, here we think about the SWOT. So, does it leverage our strengths, mitigate our weaknesses, take advantage of opportunities, and reduce threats? Would it be acceptable to our stakeholders? So there you might want to think about like two or three stakeholders. I mean, definitely the customer would be one you consider, and then shareholders would be something else you consider as well. They might look at it as, oh, you're just trying to make more money in the short term, but this is not going to be a long-term decision. But you could do a bit of a ratio analysis there, profitability analysis, and then feasible, as in, can you do it? Have you got the money, the resources, the technical know-how? It's a little bit different, isn't it? So like think about cleaning your own house versus like paying a cleaner to do it, right? So, it's sort of a different skill set managing it. So if you're cleaning your own house, you can do it whenever you want and you don't mind tidying up because like that's just all part of it for you. Whereas if a cleaner's coming in, they're coming in at a scheduled time, so you've got to make sure that you're ready for them. You've got to tidy the house for them, all that sort of stuff. So there's a bit more planning, practical implications of it. And then also, if you don't do a good job, then you're gonna like make it better, right? What if the cleaner doesn't do a good job? are you ready to have an awkward conversation with them? Do you have the skills to manage that sort of conflict and resolution there? And if they really don't want to play ball with you, are you able to leverage the contract to get them to do what you want? Or, are you going to have to shop around and get a new cleaner, basically, which would be quite, if you're talking about shopping around to get a new company to build your satellites, yeah, there'd be a lot of shopping involved there. Okay, so that's the first bit there. So quite a lot in that first page. Okay, then we get a little bit from Leothayre's annual report. So our mission is to lead in the creation and operation of satellites that meet the needs of clients for space-based facilities. So it's pretty much what you'd expect. I mean, with the mission statement, there should maybe be a little bit of inspiration there. It's okay. It's just pretty what you'd expect, standard fare. The one word that stood out to me was lead. So I want to when I'm looking at Leo there, I want to know, well, what are they doing to lead, right? Because they want to be at the front of it. But then, as you saw earlier, they've got the cubes, but they don't have the pocket cubes. So it looks like they're being left behind a little bit there. So I want to see what are they doing to be innovative, and then also for strategic reasons, what are they doing to sort of balance that risk? It seems like there's a bit of a challenge in this particular industry. So on the one hand, you want to be innovative, but on the other hand, it's really important that whatever you're doing has been tested to the nth degree. And I just think the mindset of that kind of caution, caution, caution flies in the face of innovation and trying new things. So yeah, it'll be interesting how they try and balance that. Our vision. So Leothayre's vision is to provide space-based facilities that can enhance the quality of life on Earth. So yeah, I think you I'd link that back to the sustainability side of things. So, you know, um, is sending satellites into space sustainable? In terms of profit, people, planet. So, profit, I wouldn't worry about too much. That doesn't tend to get tested much, but people and planet. So you could argue at the moment, like the way that we're doing it with the burning of the fossil fuels and the satellites burning up and a lot of the rockets getting burnt up as well, everything's getting kind of thrown away. It's not very sustainable. So there is a cost to the quality of life on Earth, just with environmental issues or, lost opportunities of doing something else. But then is that balanced out by the fact that, they can help us research into space and they can help with communications and things. It's not like a clear-cut answer really. So that's where I'd bring that out a little bit with the vision side of things. Our values. So a lot of these you want to see these being included in the way that they make decisions. So choose excellence in all decisions. So I don't want them to be making the cheap option here. They're going to go for the excellent option, which is like the quality option, the thing that's going to improve our customers' experience. Constantly innovates, anticipating customer needs. So investment in R&D. I want to see if they've been investing in R&D. So maybe we'll see that in their statement of profit and loss. We might see the growth in intangible assets on the statement of financial position. You've got a close relationship with the clients, yeah. So it does mention again, like, so develops and maintains strong relationships with its clients. So how can we anticipate a client's needs if we don't really know them and understand them? We want to know what they want before they know they want it. And then I thought this sort of reminds me of the position versus the resource approach to strategy. So the resource approach to strategy is looking at what you have, your resources, and deciding how best to leverage those um, to, 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 to get a competitive advantage. Whereas the position-based approach is more looking outside of yourself and thinking about where is the market going and how can I follow the market? Like what position do I want to be in that market? And it makes me think of things like, the iPhone or the iPad. Like if you'd asked customers, like, what do you want? They probably never would have come up with something like the iPhone. And if you'd said if you use a resource-based approach for Apple, you would have said, look, just keep doing computers because you're really good at computers, basically, because that's all your staff and your sort of facilities are set up for that. But instead, Steve Jobs went the position-based approach, like where's the market going? And he had a vision, and he saw that computing power is going to go into people's pockets rather than on their desktops. So I think this is going to be an interesting decision for Leothayre. Are they going to take a resource-based approach because they have these resources, or are they going to go with a position-based approach? Um, and yeah, it, if you think Apple, they would go position. But then if you think more of I guess an airline, they tend to go with more of a resource-based approach, and they have these shareholders because they're listed on the stock exchange. They might not want them to take a position-based approach. Insist on fairness and respect in the workplace. Okay, that's good. Again, I'm looking for anything, a scenario that sort of shows how this plays out. We talked about the relationships with clients, actual integrity, and never promises more than it can deliver. So yeah, I did think potentially there's an ethical problem here that say potential scenario might be that the a project manager has committed to a deadline, and it might be that to meet the deadline they have to reduce testing or something like that. Um, and then it would be like, okay, should they go ahead discuss the ethical implications of this? And you could bring in a bit of PIPCO, so integrity. You'd probably have to tell the customer that you've had to cut back on some of the testing to meet their deadline because you've got to be open and honest. You can't just rely on oh, if the customer doesn't ask, I guess we can get away with it. Are we being objective? Because it's all about our reputation, um, which we're biased towards protecting, when really maybe that's not the best decision for the customer, that sort of thing. And then we get into a bit of corporate governance. So Leothayre's board of directors, we've got our non-executive chair. So we've got a chair and a CEO, and they're different people. That's a good start. There's a good range of experience, so they all seem to be engineers. Fatima's an electronic engineer with 20 years in manufacturing, which is great. And she also lectures on electronic engineering at Capital University, so obviously an expert. And then became non-executive chair in 2022. So they all seem like fairly recent appointments within the sort of past 3 to 5 years. But this Dr. Robert Suaj, I think the fact that he's sort of been Leothayre since 2004 means I'm not as worried about that. At least one person's been there since the beginning. So the fact that he got promoted internally, I think that does showcase some of the values, about treating people fairly. They're valuing their staff. Links in sustainability about people as well. So I think when it comes to people, like planet sustainability is all obvious stuff, isn't it? Like solar panels and don't pollute and things like that. But people is a bit harder to get your head around. This is a good example here. So you want to make people self-sufficient. So we've obviously trained and invested in Robert, and then at the same time we've given Robert opportunities, and he's been able to take advantage of those. It's really showing, putting our money where his mouth is. When companies promote from within, I always think it's a good example of living up to that sustainability principle. Downside, possibly Robert might be a bit institutionalized. If he's come all the way from the bottom to the top, maybe it'll be a lot of things will be, that's not the way we do things around here. People might be suggesting different ways of trying things, different ways of doing things, new ideas, and he just so we've never done it like that before, and may possibly be a bit dismissive. Operations director, so Master of Engineering in Aeronautical. So again, good experience. they've come from a project management background, and they worked for a quoted aerospace company, so they've worked in a big business and supported development of the updated version of the company's airliner. So I was hoping that they might be a good balance to CEO. You know, if the CEO is a little bit like, that's not the way we do things around here, then the operations director is going to be pushing new ideas because that's their background. They like to hopefully like to innovate. And then the technology director, so aeronautical engineering. Works in spaceport for 6 years, so related background, good. Focus on the integration of satellites and then launch vehicles, perfect. Alex is now responsible for the oversight of all aspects of design and manufacturing of satellites, and he's been the technology director since 2022. So, I mean, all no red flags really so far. Chief Finance Officer, so degree in banking, worked for a major international bank, negotiating loans for high technology startups. So related experience, I think one thing, we could say to criticize our chief finance officer would be saying, well, they're not CIMA qualified, really, because we know that's the best qualification to have. So that would really enhance them if they were CIMA qualified. Marketing director, so considerable experience of aerospace sales for a major aircraft manufacturer. So again, good experience. Everything. I'm generally looking for problems when I'm reading through here, and I didn't really spot any. In terms of our independent directors or our non-executive directors, so we've got an economist, an academic, concerned about the environment, so that would help us with our sustainability issues. I thought it's interesting, so use of data provided by Leothayre clients, so she's seen the other end of it as well, 22. And then we've got a politician, or ex-politician, that does say they're retired, with an active interest in the industry and science, which, is good, but it's not going to be their expertise, but could give us a different perspective. Um, they worked in the parliamentary committees, and so they might potentially have some good contacts for us, especially when it comes to those risks later on. They mentioned that we keep an eye on what laws are coming up, so he might have the inside scoop for us. And then final lead, so major quoted civil engineering company, so basically a construction surveyor, so used to crossing the T's and dotting the I's and doing quality control, which is good because obviously that's very important for us. Joined in 2020, and combines her seat with directorship of Easttown College, a further education college. Okay, good. So well respected. So I'm looking for any corporate governance issues. First thing I tend to look at is the balance. So we know that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 executive directors, and we have 3 non-executive directors. So a little bit of an imbalance, nothing major, but generally I'd want them to be 50-50, which is the recommendation. I'm looking at what they have to do, and I think human resources is such an important thing for Leothayre. Like the innovation, we need specialist engineers who are innovative, like highly talented people that we have to go out there and recruit, and we need people who are really good at quality control and testing, and so I would like to see a separate director who just looks after human resources. The less you have to do, the better you can do it. If I give you like 20 different things to do, you're going to do 20 of them okay. Whereas if I give you 5 things to do, you might do 5 things in a great way. So it's just that kind of focus. I'd like to see that. And then technology directors, research and development, and manufacture of satellites. Again, sort of coming up with new satellites and manufacturing them. You could say there's a bit of a conflict of interest there because, Alex might be looking at it and going, well, that's an interesting idea, but that's really going to make it much more expensive and time consuming to manufacture these satellites. So again, possibly I'd like to see that split out. You'd think that if it's there saying, in the vision we want to lead the industry, why do we not have a separate research development director? With the board committee, so make sure you're just happy with what each of them does. Not recommended for the non-executive chair to sit on the audit committee. It's one of those things that it's very hard to review work that you've been a part of, and really the job of the chair is to sort of sit back and keep an eye on everything in total. So we don't want them getting too much into the detail on these things. The audit committee should report to them, and then they can decide what to do. Chair should not be a member. That would mean we have to have a minimum of three of them, which means that all three of the NEDs would have to be on them. And then one should have relevant experience, which we've got the economist, the politician, and the building surveyor. None of them have a financial background, which isn't what's recommended. Risk. So it's normally made up of only of NEDs, but only Fatma is an engineer, and it seems like the big risks are really that something could go wrong with the product. So it's interesting to think about, well, would they be able to understand that? Like, are they going to be able to identify all the risks and make sure they're being managed properly? So it would probably be good to get an engineer as a non-executive director, beyond just having our chair. And then remuneration, so that's pretty normal. All NEDs, they set the pay for the execs. Pay should attract, retain, and motivate. So we want to be able to attract talent, so it's got to be competitive. We want to be able to keep them, so we don't have a mixture of like short and long term incentives. Like long term would be shares, and motivate. So we've got to have some element of bonus in there. Then we've got the nominations committee. So they would look at the balance of the board, so making sure we've got enough NEDs and execs, or enough NEDs at least. The size, so there could be, you can't get boards that are too big or too small. And then diversity, so making sure we've got a mixture of people, which seems like we do have a diverse backgrounds here. That if anything, it's almost like all the execs are from the aerospace industry and all the NEDs are outside of that. So it might be, we need to get some executives in there outside of the aerospace industry, and we need to get some non-execs from inside of it. So might improve the diversity. And then having some objective criteria for hiring new directors, right? So making sure we've got a selection process, a recruitment and selection process.